In today's episode of our photography review show, we're gonna review images from 23 photographers. Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of our photography review show. This is our final show in January 2022. For those who don't know me, my name is Jakub and I'm a professional photographer based in West Sussex, England. Now for the past 2 or 3 years, I've been reviewing photos of my friends and colleagues, and it's something we decided to offer to our photography community here at Clever Photographer. Now it's been very popular, we've been doing it for over 6 months now, and we received hundreds of images from hundreds of photographers. So after that we had to do a little bit of limitation on the number of pictures we can accept. So for quite some time now we accept 1 to 2 images per week per photographer, and also we take the show every week and divide it between 2 or 3 parts depending on how many images we receive. Usually we start by landscape photographers, then we look at the mixed team photography, and then we look at the rest of the photographers in the 3 or 2 different parts. Now, before we jump into the actual reviewing, we have 2 things I want to share with you. First one is about our Facebook photography group. It's called Clever Photographer Academy. You can just head to Facebook, search for that, Clever Photographer Academy, and it's a place where we talk all things photography. We have lots of photography fun there. We review your photos throughout the week. We answer photography questions, and we also run photography competitions there. So it's a lots of fun. And if you haven't joined us yet, make sure you head to Facebook, search for Clever Photographer Academy, and join us today. Now the second thing we need to do, we need to look at the last week's photographer of the week. So let's do that right now. And here we go with one of your favorite part of the show, where we're gonna introduce you to our photographer of the week. Now this week's photographer of the week is Jakub Wilson, and he is based in West Palm Beach in Florida. So the reason why we went for Jakub is because we love his aviation photography. Right now I'm looking at his Instagram feed right here, and you can see Jakub does lots of aviation. He also does a little bit of landscape photography and a little bit of night long exposure photography. However, it's really the aviation which really caught our eye, because some of the pictures are absolutely incredible, and some of the captures, like this one with the explosion in front of it, is super cool. We love the level of the details, the sharpness, the movement, the capture of the movement, and everything just put together. It really works. We think that Jakub's portfolio is excellent, and we love his work all the way through. So if you want to see and learn more about Jakub's portfolio and Jakub's work, you can visit him on his Instagram page right here. Maybe tag him or give him a shout. And also another good place to go and learn more about him is to visit his portfolio website, and again the address is right here. So Jakub, we love your pictures. Keep shooting. Thank you very much for joining us, and once more, congratulations. And the same for all of you folks. If you want to become our photographer of the week and be presented on this spot, just like all the rest of our social media and newsletter, all you need to do is to head to our website, cleverphotographer.com/review, find the dates there, upload your photos, and wait for the results every week on Monday. It's a lots of fun, and even if you don't become the photographer of the week, we definitely help you to keep moving your photography skills forward. So that's this part, and now let's jump into the reviewing. And here we are with the first part of the show, where we're going to be looking at landscape photographers. Now today we have 7 landscape photographers to look at, so a nice number, mix of some of you who already sent us pictures before and some new faces too. So without any further ado, let's jump straight into it. But just a quick reminder to make sure that you like this video, that you comment below, and also subscribe to our channel so we can keep creating content like this. So now, once this is out of the way, let's jump to it. We're going to start with the first photographer, Caroline. Let's jump into it. Now, Caroline, I actually reviewed this picture already last week. So if you want to see the review, make sure you head to last week's episode, because that's where I'll tell you more about it. However, this one is a new one, and what a beautiful moody image this is. So let's jump into it. Let's have a look at the technical details. And Caroline, you're shooting with a Canon 5D Mark IV. the lens 24 to 70, f2.8, and your settings was 101 ISO 100, f11 1/400th of the second, and you were with 57 millimeters. Now, Caroline, that's a great setting. Now, again, sticking with 100 ISO is definitely the way to go to avoid any additional noise. So well done there. f11 is quite kind of higher f-stop. However, for the scene, just to make sure everything is nice and sharp all the way through, I don't think there is anything wrong with it. I think the kind of golden zone for most lenses is between f7.1 and f11. So you right there, and this is where you get the best performance out of most of the lenses. So when it comes to performance, f11 is great. And then obviously you went to 1/400th of the second, a little bit depending on the light situation, and also making sure that the shapes are nice and sharp, which when we zoom in, they are. And I have to say, when we're talking about technical part, the light is absolutely stunning. The mixture of the light and the atmospheric haze and fog is really, really beautiful. And I think that's one of the main signatures of your photos. I think really you know how to do this. It looks very natural, however, very powerful, saturated, and I love it. The sharpness is there, beautiful contrast. It's almost kind of monotone. There is only few colors happening on the picture, but I think it really, really works, and I love the result. Now, when we're going to talk about the composition or the artistic feel of the image, I also really, really like it. Although there is quite lots happening on the scene, it's done quite smart way, so it doesn't overwhelm the actual viewer. It also immediately put you in a certain mood and certain spots. So when you look at the picture, right away you're starting to imagine the kind of early mornings with the fog, with the sun, with the sheep. So you somewhere on the countryside or on the fields, and I think together it just really works. The message is clear. Everything is kind of nicely positioned. Obviously the sheeps and the trees, and then also the fact that you can see the back really helps with the depth. I think that really nicely creates the depth there. The road creating a nice flow, and all together, put together, Caroline, this is a great, great image. Now, when we're going to talk about post-processing, there is nothing much I can add, to be honest. I think it's very, very nicely done. I like how it's kind of tuned down, how the colors are very simple, which I think it helps to manage to keep the whole scene under control. And really, all together, I think it looks really, really, really cool. Maybe I would crop out just this part here. Just following the rule, which I'm always mentioning, is that if there is a certain part of the image that doesn't help to the overall composition or doesn't help to the overall message, it doesn't necessarily need to be there. So that's probably the only thing I would suggest. However, it's really not a big deal. Can just unlock this, and we can just crop maybe the bottom part here and just maybe go for something like this, and that's it. I also like how you kind of keep an eye on the edges, so except maybe this one, the shapes are all there, and all together, really, Caroline, this is an excellent picture. Well done. You should be really proud of this one, and good job. So, thank you for sending us your image. Make sure you send us more in the future. And until next time, take care. Now, we're moving to the next photographer. We have Evgeniy, which is another one of our very popular members, specifically at the Facebook Clever Photographer Academy group. And he's sending us two more pictures, again, from the kind of winter wonderland. So let's have a look at it. This one with kind of frozen trees, looking very, very cool. And this one with lots of snow and frozen elements, with a little bit of daylight. So let's talk about them. Let's have a look at the settings first of all. Right here, so Evgeniy is shooting with the Pentax, which as far as I know, the lowest setting for the ISO is 200, so obviously trying to keep it as low as possible is always the key. Now, f13 1/500th of the second, 150 millimeters. So f13, just kind of moving forward, let's just kind of understand, obviously the higher the number of the f-stop, more of the background's gonna be in focus. So let's say you would shoot this with something like f4, f7, all these buildings at the back would be a little bit more blurry. And then higher you go with the f-stop up, the more of the detail behind you get. Now, for this example, I think it would actually work if you would tune down the f-stop a little bit to whatever number you can on your camera and actually make the background a little bit more blurry, because this is a lovely scene, beautiful trees. However, the house behind doesn't really, it's not very attractive, so it doesn't really add anything to the scene. So that would be my first suggestion. When it's a situation like this, compared to here, for example, because here there is just the sky behind, so you don't need to create any depth. But in this case, I think to make the background a little bit more blurry, I would have gone with the f-stop a little bit more down. Now, 1/500 of a second is probably a result of the light situation, and there are no moving elements, so you could easily have gone a little bit slower if needed to be, but all in all, other than that, I think it looks pretty cool. The sharpness is there, which is really nice. The sun is quite strong, but it's not crazy. You're getting a little bit of the shadows here, but the contrast is still very manageable, and I think technically all in all is nicely done. Now, talking about this one, so let's have a look at the settings again. So ISO 200, as we mentioned, is the limit of the camera. 93mm f16, 1/750th of the second. So again, when we're talking about still life and we're talking about subjects that don't move, and I don't know, I haven't been here, but it looks like there is not that much happening. Your shutter speed can be easily much slower than this. 1/750th of a second is really a shutter speed where you're looking for something which is moving, or you want to freeze the moment. And when we look at the f-stop again, f16 is getting to the limit where you start to introduce some kind of blur and maybe sometimes color noise into the image. So just keep an eye on it. Each camera perform a little bit differently, but we just did some testing on the latest lenses. And really, once you hit the f16, f20, you start to introduce lots of new elements, which are really kind of unwanted elements into your images. And things start to be a bit blurry, and it's just doesn't really work. So just something to kind of keep an eye on. Other than that, technically, I mean, the sharpness is there. There are bits which maybe that some of the snow fell off. Sharpness is there, contrast is there, the light is quite nice. I like the fact that you kind of avoided any really harsh shadow, so I think that works really cool, and altogether I think technically it's quite nicely done. Now, talking about composition, on this one I would have probably cropped a little bit tighter, assuming this part together with the foreground is the main subject. Maybe I wouldn't really be scared to go to something like this and really focus just on a tree. Now, this can be easily removed by using this kind of cloning tool to do something like this. Let's see how long would it take us to remove something like this. Probably not too long. Now, if we can't do it here, it would be really easily done in Photoshop. However, we can. So this way we're getting much more simpler composition for me. Now this can be kind of tuned out later, but that's probably what I would go for. Again, similarly, you kind of want to pick a certain subject, and I think the tree together with the frozen things really work here. This one is, as I always say, confusing, strong foreground subject, and it's just this kind of leftover pieces of trees and buildings and people and cars and so on. So just something to kind of keep an eye on to try to avoid it. On this one, when we come to composition, I really like it. Now, when it comes to these kind of strong subjects like these frozen trees, I really like when each side has the same amount of space next to them to create kind of really balanced composition. So in this case, I would probably just go to something like this. And that way, suddenly the main subject is nice and centered, and it works really nicely. I really like how you kind of cropped around the building. It's all nice and straight, and I think that works really nicely too. And other than that, all thing I would be looking for would be to make sure that the background is a little bit more blurry or out of focus, so it's not as distracting. And that's about it. Now, moving on the post-processing, I love the kind of dark at the back, taking away the attention, little bit of vignette altogether. I think that works really, really well. I love this little bit of a snow. Now, I don't know if the snow was there or if you added it in post-processing, but I think it looks very cool and very natural. So I think that is very pretty too. And all in all, I think this, together with the cropping, it's very nice. Nothing much to do. Just keep an eye on the vignette down here to make sure that you don't make the snow looks like it's a little bit dirty. That's about it. Now, on this one, there is not much to add, to be honest. I think it looks very, very clean. The colors are natural. The white balance of the snow is good. I told you already about the cropping, so we don't have to repeat that. And all in all, Evgeniy, good job. So thank you very much for sharing these images with us. It's always a pleasure to see them. And until next time, take care. Moving on the next photographer, we had a guy Lieben here, and again, thank you very much for sending us your photos. We have 2 images to look at, so let's jump straight into it. So we have one right here with a lady walking on the beach. Now there is lots happening on this image, including kind of little bit overwhelming white balance with the kind of mix of purple and yellow and everything together. So that's something we're gonna probably look at. And on this one is much cooler. I really like the leading line and the kind of sun with the nice fog. However, looking at it like this with the first look, it looks a little bit soft to me, but that could be the compression. So let's have a look at the details. Anyway, we are looking at your camera settings, and this picture was Nikon D600. Your camera was 28-300. And let's have a look at the details. So ISO 160, which is very good. Obviously, the goal is always to stick as close to 100 as possible. 28 millimeters, so you're sticking with the kind of limit of the lens and going quite nice and wide. F9 is perfect for this scene. And then 1/320th of a second. So 1/320th of a second should be fast enough to be even handheld for this scene, so there shouldn't be an issue there. Obviously, with that speed doesn't give you much of a flow in the water. It really kind of freezes the moment rather than make it nice and silky, but it depends on what you are trying to do. I think all in all, it when it comes to the setting of the camera, there is nothing wrong with it. Now let's just have a look at the quality of the image, or at least it's a JPEG right here, and it's a 131 megabytes, so it shouldn't be that bad. However, when I zoom in, and I hope you can see it on the video, it really does look quite soft for me. So I wonder if it's because of the compression or if it was a little bit soft. Keep an eye on also clarity and texture to make sure that you don't remove too much of it, because from the first look it doesn't look like, but then once you start to look in and once you zoom a little bit, you can really see the softness quite strongly. Other than that, the light is very, very nice. Obviously, this is perfect time of the day to shoot. And also one more thing to kind of keep an eye on is your sensor dust. It's kind of visible here and here and here. Let's have a look. If we go into the healing brush and we click on visualize spots, you can see them quite a lot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Just something to kind of keep an eye on. If you need to see how they can be removed, it can be done inside of Lightroom or Photoshop or the other applications. There is a tutorial on it in the description of the video. Other than that, technically, I think it's quite nicely done. Now, moving on this one, let's have a look at the camera details here. And it's the same camera, different lens. So you were using 24-85 millimeters, and now the setting wise, ISO 100, so spot on, f9, 62 millimeters, and 1/200th of a second. So 1/200th of a second is a good option here to make sure that the dog and the lady is frozen, so it's good. F9 is good here, depend what you artistically wanted to create. If you wanted to separate the dog and the lady from the background, you could have gone a little bit lower. However, F9 will kind of make sure that everything is mostly in a focus. And obviously, ISO 100 is a perfect choice right here. So looking at this, the sharpness is really good. Now the light is obviously a little bit harsh. Also, what's a little bit confusing, just already by looking at it, you have a sun here, and the shadows of the dog and the person are falling the other way around. So really, even person who is maybe not a photographer will catch up on this eventually and notice that something isn't really working here. So I'm not sure if you've done some sky replacement here or how that happened. However, the sun really should be somewhere here compared to at the back. So that's something to kind of keep an eye on. Other than that, technically, there's the sharpness, no noise, so that's good. There is a little bit of some of the work maybe visible here. I really like the helicopter. I think that's quite cool. And that's about it. So let's leave it there. And let's talk about composition, about the artistic feel. Now, first thing first, I would do a little bit different crop. I think your main subject is always good when you place it on your lower third. Also, it looks a little bit like it's tilting. So let's just turn it a little bit around to maybe something like this. And then maybe just crop it to a little bit closer to the main subject. Now we want to keep an eye on the sky because we want to get maybe something like this, and I think this is the way I would leave it. So a little bit of different cropping. Now the flow of the path here I think really helps. I think that's a very smart idea. I think the dog and the person helps with the scale and with the depth of the field, because if they wouldn't be there, obviously the whole image would look a little bit flat. So I think that looks cool too. I really like the cropping other than that you have a 1/3 of the sky, 2/3 of the land. I think that also works quite nicely for landscape photography. So all in all, artistically, other than the sun, I think it's quite nicely done. Now, I'm not sure about the white balance, and we'll talk about that in a second, but other than that, it's good. Now, talking about this one, artistically, I think it's very, very cool. Now, this one is also another one, just like in your previous image, where maybe the kind of panoramatic crop 16:9 would work really nicely here, simply because, let's just get out of this. When you look at the sky above the sun, and I'm not saying all of it, but some of it probably is extra. Again, returning to the same message, if it doesn't give anything extra to the message and the main subject to the image, it doesn't probably need to be there. And it's always good to take this as the main rule when it comes to composition. Now, I'm not saying that it's wrong. It's just a suggestion of what you could do with it. So 16:9, I think will be really cool. We still want to keep the sun pretty much in the center. Now, we don't really need probably this bit here, so we can just crop it a little bit more and get something like this. And then we get something like this. So we zoom in here, we make it much more dynamic and much more stronger, the whole message, and that's where we leave it. I think other than that, composition wise, the flow with the river really helps. The trees at the back and some of these foreground elements really help with the depth. The color is beautiful, and I think all together it's really, really pretty capture. Now, moving on, the post-processing. So we need to keep an eye on the white balance on both of the images. So I think this is the kind of original. Of course, you can push a little bit of the tint. So I think that's about right. Now, something which kind of bothers me a little bit is the amount of blue on your snow. So it's always good to double check it with the picker. So let's just do something like this. So this would be your white balance for a snow. So 49:21. So if I'll bring it back to where we were, and then I go to masking and brush, and then I go 49 and 21. Then I can really simply maybe add a little bit of white as well. Brush this on the snow here in the foreground and remove some of the blue. Now I need to make sure that when I have my brush set up that my flow is more like towards 90. And now I can really remove some of the blue from the snow here and bring the original color in, which I think really helps to make it a little bit more natural. Now, obviously, let me show you before and after. I hope you can see the difference, because it really makes a huge difference looking at it like this. When you as a human looking at the snow, it's not blue, it's always white. So I think it's really good to do it with this technique. So first of all, you use this little eyedropper, you go to the snow, then you note down the values here, and then you take the brush and actually paint the values. So that way you keep the rest of the image the same. You don't change the whole white balance, you just change the white balance on these elements, and it makes it a little bit nicer and cooler. Other than that, I would leave it. I think it's super cool. Great, thank you very much. Let's move on this image. Now, again, this one, the white balance is a little bit out. I think there's way too much purple. So let's have a look if we would go to auto. and that doesn't help us. And I think this is a good example where your sky has such a different white balance compared to the rest of the image that it's really difficult to kind of tune them in together. So obviously I could go and use a linear masking tool and see if maybe I could bring down a little bit the saturation to make it a little bit more natural. Another thing I would do, I would bring down the clarity to make it a little bit more fluffy. And then let's see if we go down with the blue or up with the yellow. So you want to make it either more like a sunset, so then you push the yellow and you push the purple, or you want to cool it down and bring some of the purple. So I think the warm actually works a little bit better there. Now, looking at it with another view, you can see again a little bit of sensor dust here and here. Again, that can be really easily removed by using the healing brush. So you just make the size right and you paint here. And then we can do the same for this one. So let's do something like this. And this one. And I think there is one here as well. So just something to kind of keep an eye on. Now, all in all, the picture, whole picture, I would usually remove the saturation a little bit and push the vibrance. So that also helps. And then now what we need to do is maybe remove some of the purple in the saturation here. Not all of it, but just a little bit of some of it. And then add effect and maybe add a little vignette. So here you go. This is something what I would do. Let me show you. So this is right now. This is all the way before. You see how you have some of the turquoise, you have some of the blues, lots of purples. I think this after looks a little bit more natural and it looks a little bit more cooler to me. So anyway, great. Thank you very much for sending us your photos. It was a pleasure to see them again. Take care and send us more in the future if you can. Moving on to the next photographer, we have a John Lister. John, we have two images to look at in this kind of sepia effect. Very cool. Let's move on it. So we are here looking at first the technical part of the image. So Nikon Z6 and the settings were ISO 125, f8 1/322 and 33.5 millimeters. Now the lens you were using was a Nikon 24-70, so maybe native lens. However, when it comes to the setting, they are quite right. Obviously, f8 is a good one for this, making sure everything is nice and sharp. 125 ISO is perfect, and 1/320th of a second, pretty much in this case, really depends on the time of the day when you're shooting. Now, looking at it from this kind of eye, it looks like the light was a little bit harsher. And it looks like the sun was a little bit on the top, but it's not that bad. And I think all in all, it looks quite cool. Everything has a nice crisp sharpness in it, which I really like. And lots of details, not much of a depth, but altogether, I think technically it's quite nicely handled. Now on this image, let's have a look again. Same camera, same lens. Now this time you went for ISO 640, f8 1/320th of a second and 57 millimeters. Now, I wonder what made you go higher on ISO on this one. And if you have a time, please make sure you write it in the comments so we can kind of start some kind of conversation and I can learn more about your thought process. However, f8 is a good choice for this situation when you are so busy and lots happening on the image. 1/320th of a second would be the question. Was there lots of movement? Was there a wind? If yes, then yes, you want to go a little bit faster, although I think somewhere about 1/200th of the second would be probably enough. And that way, the slower you would go with the shutter speed, the lower you could go with the ISO and avoid any noise. Now, let's see how the camera did for this. And all in all, there isn't much noise really, not in the sky, which is good. And a little bit on the actual building, you can see it a little bit here and there. However, all in all, the result isn't bad at all. So technically, other than that, I think it's quite cool. Now let's move to the composition and the artistic field. So talking about this one, as always with these structures, try to include, John, as much space around as possible. Just a little bit more here, maybe at least the same amount as here. These buildings really need a little bit of extra space, not crazy too much, but I think it's always good to get a little bit of that. I really love what you've done with the cloud here. I think it helps to the overall composition. The depth is here a little bit. Now, this is the case where maybe lowering the f-stop a little would help. So that way the trees would be a little bit softer, and it would make you feel a little bit more like there is a more depth in it. However, the foreground element works here, the middle ground, background too, and all in all, technically and artistically, I think it's quite nicely done. Now, we're going to talk about the CPI in a second. So in the meantime, let's move to this one. This one, artistically, I tell you where is the problem. There is lots happening on this image, obviously, with the tree, with the leaves, with the grass, and with the house. And by you turning it to the sepia, you remove every last bit of the contrast. There is already not much contrast based on the brightness or contrast of the image, and now you remove the color contrast, so really everything is a little bit melting together. Now we can have a look at how we can help to this. However, sometimes this kind of monotone works really well, sometimes it's not the best choice. So let's have a look what we could do. I think we could crop a little bit tighter by using the 16:9. So we would go for something like this, and that way we would reduce some of the top. And now what we could do is, definitely we need strong vignette. So we bring the focus on the house itself. And now really all you can do here is to push a little bit the contrast. That's definitely something we can do. We can in effect push a little bit of the clarity. So that also helps with the contrast. And now the rest needs to be done locally. So we're going to use brush. And with the brush, we're going to apply some minus exposure. So definitely we need to do that in the areas which are already dark, so to create more contrast. So I think here again on this whole part here, and here and here. So that way we creating a little bit of separation. Now we can create another brush and actually add some extra exposure. So that definitely into the house to have it stand down bit more for us, and we can do a little bit at the tree because that is a nice texture all in all as well. Now the next thing, we can close the image a little bit more here from the bottom, and we can do the same from the top. And once we do that, we get a little bit more contrast, and we actually bring the main subject out a little bit more. Now again, we can maybe push the exposure on the building again, just to really have it come out. Maybe not that much, but at least something like this to really make it visible a little bit more. And I think with the first one where we were actually adding minus, we can push it even more. So then we get something like this. And there you have it. So now we're getting some green here. So I think it's good to maybe remove that. That can be done in settings. However, all in all, John, both of them very cool. I think editing wise, this is what I would do with this one. This one, nothing much. Obviously, the usual set of editing on this one with the vignette. I think that's always cool. You could add little bit of maybe radial gradient and highlight more this building. And do similarly the same thing if we just duplicate this and add it to the building here, and then you can just bring down a little bit of the exposure and maybe push the contrast and take it from here. Anyway, John, good ideas, a lovely approach. Thank you very much for sending it over. Take care and send us more pictures in the future. Now, we have a Stuart in front of us. Stuart, we have two images from you this week. This absolutely epic sunset or sunrise, depending. Let's have a look if we have any time data. 7:30 it seems like. So if it was 7:30, definitely sunset. And here we have a little bit of a sea with some foreground. So let's have a look at it. So Stuart, out of the two, I love this one. This one, I think there's not much happening on it, to be honest. Obviously, I know that you included this as a foreground. However, I think anytime you use a foreground and you kind of cut it half, or it's a little bit confusing so the human doesn't know what it is, it's probably better not to include it at all. So in this case, for this image, I would probably crop it a little bit differently. However, let's have a look and talk about it first from technical point of view. Sadly, we don't have the data of the camera, so just by looking at it, for what I can see, there is a little bit of noise there. which could be again from actually compressing the image to JPEG. However, I see a little bit of noise there. This part is obviously a little bit blurry and softer, and this part is more sharp, so that makes me think that maybe the f-stop was somewhere on the lower numbers. So that's just something to kind of keep an eye on. The light is nice and interesting, you know. Sadly, also there is not much happening in the sky, so you have these huge two spaces, which you need to kind of work with and look at, and you need to kind of think of what is it you're really trying to show. So technically, I think the noise would be one thing, and the sharpness would be another thing I would look at. Now on this one, technically, just when it comes to the framing, I would make sure that my horizon is straight, which I think is always a good idea. So you can just rotate it like this and get that right. Maybe not that much. Let's see. Is it too much? Let's have a look. I think this is about right. So that would be my first thing. Now, again, there is no data there. However, you're getting lots of noise in the sky, Stuart, so that's again something to look at. Definitely, I know this is kind of really low light situation, so you need to see, but the golden goal is ISO 100. Now, if you can get as close as to it, it really helps. So then you don't have to do crazy post-processing and introduce additional noise and so on. So that would be one thing I would be looking at. Other than that, the silhouette-like effect, I think it's quite nice. The sharpness seems to be good. The exposure is good. I love the level of details in the sky. So all in all, technically, it's not bad. It's just the noise I would be looking at and see what I could do from there. Now, when it comes to composition, obviously the sky is beautiful, but there is a lot happening here. Now, when it comes to the silhouettes, it can be lots of things done with it a little bit differently. So I think if you want to go for something like this, I would probably completely darken even the whole bottom. So I would use this kind of masking, and I would really bring the exposure down there and do something like this. So that way, it really is the silhouette effect you're going for, and it makes it so much more simpler, because if you don't do it, there is lots happening there, and I think it gets a little bit overwhelming. There is already lots happening on sky, so let's just take away the part where there is lots of happening down there as well. Now, here again, we want to make sure that the picture is straight, the horizon is straight, so let's just go into the geometry, use the auto, and take it from there. The next thing, I would definitely crop it to something like 16:9. Completely avoid this part because it's really unnecessary there, I think. And I would go for probably something like this here. So let's say something like this. So more powerful scene. Again, anyway, it's about the islands, it's about the seas, maybe about the boat. And that's about where I would take it from. We can again straighten it a little bit more just to make sure that we are nice and straight, and that's how I would leave it. Again, there is not really much happening here, but still lovely simple capture. This is how I would frame it. Now post-processing, let's see, if you turn it to black and white, does it help? Not really. I think just keep an eye on your white balance with kind of maybe go for little warmer colors here. That would be one thing. And obviously you could do a little bit of a vignette, close the picture to make it a little bit more interesting, and I will leave it there. On this one, I already show you what I would do with the bottom part. So really just to kind of darken the bottom. It's also good to do similar things from the top, just to close the picture and bring a little bit more attention down, so maybe like this, and I would leave it there. You know what, I think the white balance is nice. Another thing you could do, you could actually select the sky, which will take a moment, and once that's done, you could actually go and bring down the clarity, which makes the clouds a little bit fluffier and a little bit more natural. So I think that always helps a bit when the sky is so detailed like yours. Anyway, Stuart, thank you very much for sending us your photos. It was a pleasure to review them. Take care and send us more in the future if you can. Two more photographers left for this landscape part of the show. So we have a Tom to start with. Tom, let's have a look at your images. One here, another one here. Now this one has a little bit of a cropping, not finished up there, so something to look at. And this one, there is lots happening here. Sadly, also lots of noise and softness and pixelation here. Let's have a look at the quality of the images. it should be fine. We are not that small. However, really, when you look at it with me, once you zoom in just a little bit, it almost looks like just pixels. But anyway, let's have a look at it, Tom. So starting from here, let's have a look at the technical data. So you're using Olympus camera and your settings were ISO 100, 6.4 millimeters, f4.5, and 1/160th of a second. Now 6.4 millimeters, that makes me wonder if this is some kind of like a mobile device or mobile camera, because that's unusual number. However, the rest of the settings is quite right. I think ISO 100, definitely something to go for. f4.5, it's on a lower side, definitely. And on the regular cameras, really the sweet spot for this kind of photo would be somewhere between f7.1 and f11. And when there is a lot happening just like here, I would probably go for the f11 just to make sure everything is nice and sharp with lots of details. Now 1/160th of a second should be perfectly fine for handheld, and it should really give you this kind of frozen look on the water. If you would want to get the nice silky smooth water, you would probably want to go to something like 0.5 second and slower. However, for that you would really need a tripod, so that's just for the future. Now looking at it like this, I think the pixelation is our biggest enemy here, together with a little bit of noise. I can see from when I look at it from far, we get some nice details here, and we get the details all the way through. It's just, I'm surprised with the level of the pixelation here, Tom. But technically, setting wise, it's good. The light is quite nice and pleasant, and the sharpness is quite good as well. Now talking about this one, there is no camera details on this one, sadly. So just from what I can see, so obviously again probably quite high shutter speed because we have this frozen effect on the water, which in this case works quite cool actually, so I don't have a problem with that. Now there is details on the rock, which is also really nice. However, the light is very harsh here, so you get this really bright light in the front, and then you get this really dark shadow inside, together with almost kind of dark spots here. So the light wasn't perfect for this one, I guess. Tom, when we move to the composition, this is for me a little bit too tight. I think probably there is a lot happening here, and I get you what you're kind of trying to do to capture it. However, I think for scene like this, I would have expected to be a little bit wider and understand a bit more what's happening there, because the subject and the message isn't 100% clear. Never mind the fact that there is a little bit of cropping to be done on the top there. But like this, you just kind of really wondering, what is it? Where are you? What are you trying to show? Then obviously there is this wild water, okay. However, I think a bit more has to be done there. Now, there's also like a high softness here, which is a little bit visible, the editing. So that's something maybe to look at in a post-processing. The one thing I would say, I really like the depth of field. I think the rocks help to create a little bit of texture and to create a little bit of depth, and that's about it. Now talking artistically about this one, I think this one is much more smart when it comes to composition. Obviously this foreground, I wish there would be a little bit more of it there, because it's just very little, so it's almost not enough. However, it's very smart. Obviously you could do another thing and completely avoid it, because with these rocks up here in foreground, they also work as a foreground, and it doesn't really matter if the flowers are there or not. However, that works. The shape of the river creates really nice leading lines and flow. The trees also help with the depth, so and the rocks help with the depth, so you kind of have the idea of the leading line in and of the depth of the whole image. And I think it's very nicely done. I think it's very balanced, and it's actually very cool artistically, this one. Now post-processing, I think this one, I can't tell you much because really the pixelation is there a lot. I think the white balance is quite nicely done. The light is quite nicely done there as well. So all in all, I think it's quite cool. Maybe a little bit of vignette here just to close it a little bit more, and keep an eye on these spots, which looks really soft, and I'm not sure if it's not done with the brush. So if I can see it, it's maybe something you need to keep an eye on and do it maybe with a little bit less strength. Now on this one, post-processing, there is not much more you can do. I would keep an eye on my white balance to make sure that there is maybe not as much difference between the two. This seems to be a really bright compared to rest of it. I would open the shadows a little bit more to get details here as well, so it's a bit more visible. Again, you can do a little bit of the vignette to close the image, but I think this picture, we would need to look at it from the raw point of view and see what can be done there. If you can crop it maybe a little bit differently, it would maybe help, but that's about it. So Tom, thank you very much for sending us your images. It was lovely to review them. And if you have more, make sure you send them in the future. And finally, we're going to end up the landscape session with Tony. Tony, I know you send us several pictures, but we only review 1 or 2 per week. So I had a look at the pictures you send us, and I picked those 2, which I really like. And second, because it's a nice combination of black and white photo and a really nice kind of colorful, moody landscape photo right here. So let's see if we have details of the camera. We have some details. So we have details on this one. We know which camera you use. So this one was Canon 5D Mark II, and this one doesn't have details at all, but that will not stop us because we look at it from the kind of bare eye. So starting with this one, beautiful moody light, which I really like, together with the mist at the back and a little bit of fog, I think works very, very nicely. The details, so I'm assuming maybe the f-stop on the lower side with getting nice depth, sharp foreground here, and then gradually going to the more softness at the back, I think works very well too. Now zooming in, again, it's very small file, 634 kilobytes, so it's not 100% visible, but I see the sharpness. I don't see much of a noise in it, so all in all, I think technically it's very well done. Now on this one, so there is no data at all. It's a little bit bigger image, so that's good. When we move in, there is a touch of noise. However, that could be also grain, which some photographers use for black and white photography. So no problem there. Again, the depth is quite nice here, with the sharpness being mostly on this part of the image. And also here. However, it's still crisp. It's not really a bad thing, so I quite like that. I really like the framing here. I like how you kept an eye on a tree. I think that's really important, and I think it really works here. So all in all, technically, I think it's nicely done. There is nice light again, nice mist. The animals works here. The glow is really nice here as well, so it's nicely put together. Now, when it comes to composition and artistic effect, I think first, without looking at any of the composition rules, I think the picture make you feel certain way. So I think that's really important before you start to look at some kind of depth and leading lines and everything else. So I think when you look at it, together the work of the black and white photo and the mist and the kind of trees and a little bit of a silhouette effect on them, I think they really create a very, very nice atmosphere. So that is well done, and you can't take that away. The framing is really nice. I wouldn't frame it differently. Obviously, you could maybe get rid of a little bit of it here, but that's about it. I think a little bit of the kind of brightness and dodge and burn really helped here as well. All in all, there isn't really much added to it from the kind of classic rules. So the depth of field is mostly the depth of the picture is mostly kind of represented with the trees, with some of the trees being at the back behind the mist. I think that works really nicely. There is maybe a little bit of a flow created by the path here. There is the kind of 1/3 of the image with most of the ground elements, and then there is a lot of the sky, which I think it works. It kind of balances the picture together. So all in all, I think the most important is for the artistic part is that it makes you feel a certain way. So that works, and that's most important to start with. Now on this one I think is more traditionally composition well handled. Now the depth we already mentioned. So obviously the tree with starting with the sharp run and getting the softness all the way through, I think it really works here. Also, the path through really works. I think that creates really nice flow and leading line through. The light creates really nice contrast. So that's also very, very well done. And all in all, I think this one is just very, very well done. Really composition well handled here. Now, when we come to post-processing, the white balance is spot on. The exposure is nicely done. The highlights, shadows are really nicely done as well. So there's not much I would be doing here. I think together, the nice brightness and glow coming from the side. Tony, I'm sorry I can't help much more, but it's nicely done. And this black and white is spot on. Really the way I like it. I really like when it's kind of really powerful. I think lots of people do black and white when it's just kind of very uncontrasty and very light black and white, but your style, when you really hit the blacks and hit the whites and hit the greens, I think it really works together and it creates this beautiful effect, and it really helps to this scene and to this composition, the way you edit it, and it's just beautiful. So Tony, thank you very much for sending us your images. If you haven't joined us yet, make sure you head to our Facebook group, Clever Photographer Academy, because it would be joy to have you there and share some of your work and thoughts of photography with us. And the same goes for all of you folks. If you want to join us already for the next episode of the Photography Review Show, all you need to do is to head to our website, cleverphotographer.com/review, and that's where you can find all the dates, links, and information you need to have in order to get your photos review in our show. For today, thank you very much for watching us. Take care, and until next time, keep shooting.